Hi guys, I'm Marissa and I'm back with another video. Today I want to share with you a wrap up of all of the books that I've been reading since the middle of June. Last I did an update was up until the 15th of June, and I was thinking that I was going to just film a video from 15th of June to 15th of July and then film another video from 15th of July to the 31st of July, but now I just decided to film a full video like with all of the books that I've read since the 15th of June, just to get it over with, because I don't want to have to film two wrap-ups. They take a lot of time, so I'm going to try and keep it fairly short with the reviews, because I have 17 books to talk about, so it's going to take a while to talk about all of them. But I'm going to try and speak as well as I can about them all. The first book I have to talk about since last time was Murder on Fifth Avenue by Victoria Thompson. This is book 14 in the Gaslight Mystery series. It's a series that sets in the late 1800s in New York, and it follows two main characters, one of them being Sarah Brandt, who is a widower, and she is taken the profession as a midwife and is sort of a part of this very rich family, but she decided to estrange from her family when she married sort of beneath her, but she's sort of in the midst of this series sort of rebuilding her relationship with her parents and her family, but still being her own person and having her own life and her own job. Then we have Detective Frank Malloy, who is a police detective in the New York Police Department, and at this time, which is still probably a case, but there was a lot of corruption, but Frank is trying to always find the correct murderer stuff thing. In this one, Frank and Sarah's father sort of teams up to help each other with a murder case, because what Sarah's father is part of this club, sort of gentleman club. I've forgotten the name of it, but it was sort of a club where a lot of these high profilic people in the New York time at this point was part of, and one of them is murdered. And so Sarah's father wants Frank to make sure to find out who it was, if it was part of the gentleman club thing. Sarah's father would deal with it. If it wasn't, he was allowed to arrest them. So it was quite an interesting discussion, and I think it's always really interesting reading this because there's so many weird things that happens in these societies, but overall I keep enjoying them, and it was a fun time. I rated another 4 stars, so I don't think I have a hard time seeing me ever giving a lower rating to this, because I enjoy the characters so much and I enjoy the mysteries. They are always fun to follow, and I love all of these little things that is so distinguished to the time period that I've come to enjoy to follow, to find out about. The next thing that I read was Fullmetal Alchemist volume 15. I don't have a physical copy of it right now because I returned it to the library, but Fullmetal Alchemist volume 15, Fullmetal Alchemist series, follows these two brothers who are alchemists. They're state alchemists. They are the Fullmetal Alchemists because they once tried to resurrect their mother after her passing with alchemy magic, and it backfired on them because you're not allowed to do that, and it caused one of them to lose his arm and his leg, and the other one lost his entire body. So instead, they're sort of his soul is captured in this suit of armor thing, and the other brother has a sort of metal arm, metal leg thing instead. This one is definitely very much talking a lot about some backstory stuff or some building up to the next part of the plot thing, and I'm enjoying it, and I am looking forward to getting back into the current timeline again with the next book, so we can move forward with the plot, because this wasn't my favorite. I still gave it 4 to 4.5 stars. I've forgotten my exact rating, but I definitely enjoyed it, and but I am looking forward to the next one, also because like the author noted in the last pages of this volume that we are getting back to the current timeline in the next volume. So I'm excited about it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to change. The next thing that I read was Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. This is the first book. I think it's a duology. I'm not sure. I'll have to look more into that. But this is a book that's set in the Civil War time, when people are fighting off these zombies, and it definitely talks a lot about the injustices that black people also see in this time, obviously, and talks about how they are to blame for this whole zombification thing happening and all of that. It was really interesting, and I enjoyed the book. It was engaging. We were following some really cool characters, and I enjoyed the hell out of the audiobook. The audiobook was narrated by Barney Turpin, and she just does such a good job in narrating audiobooks and talking and expressing everything. And so I definitely highly suggest you listen to the audiobook if you decide to read it, because it was really done very excellently. And yeah, gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing that I finished was The Truth by Terry Pratchett. This is book 25 in the Discworld, but it's also book 2 of the Industrial Revolution series, and it follows like the first ever journalist in the Discworld. So this is sort of a book that's just following this man who accidentally becomes a journalist and trying to tell the truth about stuff and figuring things out, and people don't like him, and they try to make him, yeah, it comes with all of the negativity as a journalist. I did end up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, so I definitely did enjoy it, but it's not like a favorite or anything, so it's fine. The next thing that I finished was Dead in the Family by Charlaine Harris. And this is the 10th Suki Stackhouse book, I think, and I've almost forgotten what this one exactly is about, but I didn't enjoy this one as much as the previous book. There was a couple of, oh yeah, they were grieving over a character death. I definitely do enjoy this series, but I didn't love this specific book, because I think it could have done better. The plot could have been structured better, I guess. I wasn't super into the plot, and I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. It is, however, a pretty fast read. They're all pretty fast, so yeah. The next thing that I read and finished was When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. This is book 6 in the Bridgerton series. And the Bridgerton is a Regency romance series that follows a Bridgerton daughter or son in every book, and their romance escapades. This was definitely not my favorite. This follows this love story between Francesca Bridgerton and this rake called Michael Sterling. And yeah, it was definitely not the best, but it was also just, I like Julia Quinn's writing, I like her humor, and I enjoy that part of the stories every time. It's not like it was a bad book, it's just not the best, like if I compare it to some of the other Julia Quinn books or the Bridgerton books. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. So that was the end of June. Now let's breeze past it, because I do still reread books, and I did a reread of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I honestly just hate J.K. Rowling for being how she is. But I did enjoy my time rereading this, having a lot of these, like specifically looking for things to look at negatively in this book, especially considering things that happened. So yeah, but I did enjoy it. I'm not going to talk more about it. It was a reread. I'm still continuing to reread the books over the year, but I don't want to talk too much about them. The next thing that I finished is definitely one I want to talk about, and that is Den Faldne Djævel, or The Fallen Devil by Kenneth Andersen. This is the last and final book in the Great Devil War series, so I finally finished it. It was such a joy reading the final book, and it was so well put together, and it was like everything I wanted the ending to be, I guess. And it took me through all of the different emotional aspects of my emotional range, I guess. I definitely enjoyed it a lot, and I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. It was a perfect end to the series, and it's definitely easily one of my favorite fantasy series now. It just does so well in terms of it just built this world really well, and the tone and the characters, I think it's just done really well, and I hope that when people start reading them that they will see the same things. Yeah, so happy about that. It was a great end to the book. Another book, and this book I also had to hand back in at the library, so that's why I don't have a physical copy of it. The next book I also read was Fruits Basket Volume 9 by Natsuki Takaya. It's been so long since I read the last Fruits Basket volume that I had, and I remember last time reading it that I had such a difficult time following along with the plot, and there were too many characters to try to keep a hold on. And I think I realized something this time around when I was reading it, and I don't know if that has been the case every time and I just haven't paid attention to it, or it's because there's so many characters now that I have to pay attention to it, but it seemed like we were following a new character with every chapter in this volume. So that definitely made it easier for me to distinguish between the storylines and why it was jumping so much. So I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Yes. The next book that I finished was Gustav Gloom and the Nightmare Vault by Adam Troy Castro. Yeah, this is the second book in the Gustav Gloom series. I read the first one back in January, decided to get to something that was easy to get through. I was in a difficult mindset in parts of this, so I just wanted to listen to something that was easy and I'll get through quickly and sort of like that. And it definitely worked for that, and it wasn't as good as the first time I read Gustav Gloom book, the first book, but it still, I enjoyed how the characters developed throughout this one, so I ended up giving this book a 3.5 stars. It's a lower middle grade series. It's not, it follows this boy Gustav Gloom who lives in this big mansion kind of thing on his own. He has no parents. He's just there by himself, and all of the shadow people is like a little bit creepy, and he becomes friends with this girl who moves to town with her family, and sort of their friendship that's building. It was really cute, and then it had these like creepy undertones that I thought were done really well, and I think it would work really well for the target audience, because it was definitely a little bit creepy, and it gave a little bit of creepy vibes, but for an adult, like, it's not a big deal, but for kids I think that they would be on the edge of their seat trying to figure out what's going to happen to Gustav Gloom and his friends. The next book that I finished is another reread of mine, and that is Shadow Kiss by Richelle Mead. This is the 3rd book in the Vampire Academy series, and this is also my favorite in the Vampire Academy series for my first read, I guess. I think it's my favorite, and it's definitely still a really solid book, and I enjoy my time reading it. Like, this series builds up quite well, and I think especially in this one we get a lot of backgrounds, like a lot of information about Rose's and who she is and why the bond she has with Lisa, which is why it's called Shadow Kiss, because that is what the bond is called. The negative aspects of being Shadow Kiss is definitely being revealed in this one, and obviously there's also a couple of things that happens with her relationship, but overall I think it's a lot more about how her friendships and about her own person, and then it has like a really epic ending that I remember the first time I read it. I just had to know what was going on in the next book, because it ends like with a cliffhanger and you don't know how it's all gonna end up, but you have to know. You just want to know how it's all going to end up. On a reread, this was a 5 stars again, so I'm super stoked that this is still holding up to me. And yeah, even though it's pretty old now and it's been a long time since I read it, and I only read through it once. The next book that I finished was The Talisman by Stephen King. This is a book that he co-wrote with Peter Straub. This is a fantasy book, and it follows this boy called Jack who don't know his father. His father's never been a presence in his life, and his mother is very deadly ill, and he goes on this journey to try and find the talisman that will be able to cure his mother, and sort of that whole storyline. Honestly, this took so much time getting anywhere, and when it did, it was still not super impressive to me. I overall just didn't love it, but I thought it was a good story. So it's not bad, it was just fine, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So it's sort of average book, but also had a few forgettable parts. But I did like it better when the character named Wolf was introduced. I think that was the turning point when it became a little bit more interesting to me as a reader. But the first part was definitely very, very slow and not very engaging, and yeah, it's definitely not my favorite Stephen King, and it's not one I recommend a lot, and it was way too long, you know, in my opinion. I would highly rather you read like the Eyes of the Dragon thing. It was a much better story, or just get started on the Dark Tower series. That's also great. But yeah, so that was that. And now we're getting into my reading rush part. The first thing I read for the reading rush was Væddermændenes by Tobias Stenbæk. This is a Danish fantasy, adult high fantasy kind of thing, and it follows this family that has that owns this big farm ranch thing in this world, where they have sheep, and they are herding sheep, and they get a lot of income from selling sheep skin, or skin. Wool. But yeah, we are seeing the perspectives of the 3 sons in this house. The oldest brother is called Roderick, this middle child is called Cedric, and the youngest one is called Stormfrick. And they all each have a different thing that they're good at, and Roderick, the oldest one, is the heir to the house and to overtaking it, but he's also trying to become a knight to sort of gain a little bit more power in this world. And then things starts happening. I don't know how much I should talk about this because it's a Danish fantasy. It hasn't been translated, and I don't know if it's ever going to be translated, but if you are Danish, definitely read it. It's great. If you know Danish, read it. It's great. I gave it 4.5 stars. I highly enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see how this is going to expand in the future. And I think it's going to be a trilogy, and I have the second book here, so I can actually read it quite soon. So we'll see when I get around to it, but I definitely enjoyed it. Another book that I read for the reading rush was Cress by Marissa Meyer. This is the 3rd book in the Lunar Chronicles series. It's a sci-fi series that's sort of a far futuristic dystopian sort of world, where people are dying of this plague, and it's also a fantastical world. It sort of has some fantasy elements because like there are people who is living on the moon known as the Lunars, or the Lunar, yeah, and they have abilities to like manipulate your mind, and people are afraid of them. And we have Queen Levana from the moon who's trying to invade Earth and cause destruction everywhere. But it also is like a mix of retellings of fantasy, of fairy tale retellings. But it's like loosely retelling them, because that's actually one of the reasons I really like it, because yes, we have the familiar characters, but I don't think it's the familiar sort of plot that we know from the original fairy tales, which I tend to find boring. So, but this one I enjoyed. It follows Cress. Cress is Rapunzel, and she is trapped on this satellite thing that floats around the Earth, and she's been captivated there. She's kept in captivity there for 7 years, and one day she is rescued and things happen. It also like blends the storylines from the previous 2 books into this one, because we are following like 6 characters now, perspectives, or we follow the perspective of Scarlet, of Cress, Thorn, Cinder and Kai, so 5 perspectives. We didn't get a perspective from Wolf, but the other 5 characters were in this one, and yeah, I ended up really enjoying it. I guess it's my favorite, but the first time I read Scarlet, I gave it 5 stars. I don't think this is a 5-star book, but I think it's my favorite in the series, so I still give it a 4.5 stars because I was highly entertained and I thought it was fun reading it. And I'm definitely intrigued to read Winter and figure out how this is all going to end up. And I definitely enjoyed Cress and Thorn. Cress as a character and the relationships she sort of built with Thorn. So yeah, enjoyed it. The last and final thing that I finished over the reading rush was The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, the first part of the Lord of the Rings series. The Lord of the Rings was supposed to be 1 book, but it has been divided into 3 books. We know this story. I read it, I listened to this in audio form, and it was definitely fun. I enjoyed this so much. Like J.R.R. Tolkien's way of painting a picture, like of describing the world and making you definitely know how everything is looking, what they're doing, what they're eating, like everything is so vividly expressed. And some people hate how much he goes into details, but I thought it was great. I think it was easy to see where everything was going, and I definitely enjoyed it. Now, because I've watched all of the movies, I obviously had voices in my head of how they were supposed to sound. But when I was listening to the audio, it's obviously different because it was a different narrator, and that was a little bit different. And then I paid attention to how many songs there was in the book, but still, it's a great story and I loved it and I enjoyed my time reading it. I was never bored. I was completely immersed in the story from the beginning to the end, and I'm so looking forward to watching the movie now again, like rewatching it at some point when I have time, because it's 4 hours. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I end up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. It took a time to find out the rating, but I ultimately think it's a great book, and yeah, deserving 5 stars. The 16th book that I read since last time was Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. This is a short novella length book. It's set in the southern US, I'd say Texas, but I might have forgotten already. It's not very good. It's a sort of different alternative place where these women are librarians. They ride around on horses, and they say they're librarians, but that's not exactly what this is. I'm not gonna go into detail about what it is about, because I think that's part of the charm of this. It's also a female-female romance, and it was great. It was a great romance, I think, but it was not my favorite story by Sarah Gailey. I think River of Teeth was better. I debated whether it was a 3 or 3.5 stars, but I think it's a 3 stars, but I did still enjoy it, and 3 stars is not bad. It's just, if I compare it to River of Teeth, I think River of Teeth was better. But I did really enjoy this one, and I thought it was interesting, but I gave it 3 stars. So the last and final thing I finished last night, and that was The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. I finally finished this. Like, it took me 7 months to read this. Like, since I actually picked it up again. I don't know why it took me so long, and I It's not because I didn't like it, but I just definitely wasn't in the mood for this type of fantasy when I picked it up in January, even if I liked it. And there were a couple of the characters that was annoying me at the time. I think the thing is, the last bit, the last third or something, was 5-star worthy. It was really great. It was a great ending. I thought it was done really well. And then we have a middle part that was good, but also had a couple of chapters I was kind of indifferent about. The beginning, I think I think I'm ending on a 4.5 stars for this whole thing, because I think it was a great story, and I think it had a lot of great characters, and my favorite characters had a really, I think Spook's character development was amazing. We had Sasset's character development. I like how it was showing how much he was grieving after things that happened in the second book, and the thought processes of how he came about this thing, and how everything else turned out. And I ended up really enjoying it and gave it 4.5 stars. It's not my favorite thing ever, but I definitely appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to reading the next part of the Mistborn world, which will, what are they called? Wax and Wane, I think, if I remember correctly. But these books are so much shorter, so I don't think it's going to be as intense and as intimidating picking them up, but it's going to be the same world, and just far into the future. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to be. I forgot, is the first called Shadows of Self, maybe, of those 3 books. But yeah, super happy I finished this one. So this is all I read since the middle of June. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of the books that I've been talking about today, what your thoughts are on them. What have you been reading recently? Have you read anything great? I hope this did not turn out way too long. I tried to be as quick as I could. Yeah, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.